Hi, it's Mrs. Banneker here. I'm going to take you through the key components of classification and division essays in case you missed it in class or in case you need a refresher while you're planning your essay or studying for your quiz. All the information that I'm giving you here comes from Chapter 10 of your book, Seeing the Pattern, and it might be helpful to go back there if you need any clarification on the topics that I'm talking about or if you want to look at sample essays or get some ideas for organizing your paper. So here, first of all, we're going to talk about what these kinds of writing are. They're very closely linked. They have a lot of the same characteristics, so we are doing them together. That's why the book pairs them together. But there are some slight differences. So for a classification essay, we're taking a topic and we're dividing that topic up into groups. We're helping to classify items together so that we can understand them a little bit more. So for clothing, you classify types of clothing, hopefully when you're putting them away in your dresser to keep yourself organized. So you put socks in one drawer, you put t-shirts in another drawer, pants in another drawer. Or you might take students and group them in the cafeteria based on how they sit to help us understand them a little bit better. Think about the movie Mean Girls when Janice is taking Katie on the tour of the cafeteria and she says, here's where all the band kids sit, here's where all the artsy kids sit, here's where the plastics sit. She helps us understand the cliques in the cafeteria based on where they sit. Division is going to take one item and break it into its parts. So we might take a department here at Parkway North, the Modern and Classical Languages Department, and divide it up into the languages that are taught. So we have the French classes, the German classes, the Spanish classes, the Latin classes. Here are the characteristics that are the things that you need to consider as you are drafting your essays, whether it's classification or division. First, you want to make sure that you're grouping your ideas into logical categories or logical parts. And this means you're going to choose one principle for classification as you are planning your categories. And then divide your items into groups based only on this principle and make sure you're using this principle consistently. So here's what I mean by principle. If we're going to classify birds, we might choose the principle of size, and all of our categories are going to relate to size. So big birds, medium birds, small birds. Or we might choose habitat, and all of our categories are based on where birds live. It wouldn't make sense in an essay. Our essay wouldn't feel balanced if our categories were, I'm going to take birds and I'm going to talk about big birds, and then I'm going to talk about birds that live in trees, and then I'm going to talk about birds that eat leaves. Those don't really line up, and it feels like they don't fit in the same essay. So that's where the principle of classification comes in. It gives us a common thread to link all of our topics. We can do the same thing if we're looking at college professors. We would classify college professors by age, maybe in one paper where we're talking about older professors who are nearing retirement, and then middle-aged professors, and then the young professors who've just started. Or we might do the same thing and classify professors by teaching style or courses taught. The next thing we want to do is make sure that our categories, our classification is meaningful to an audience. And so we have to determine, what is our goal? What are we trying to tell the audience based on classifying or dividing this topic? And then what's important to the reader? What information are they going to want to know or need? And then we're going to use this information to develop our principles and our categories. So if we go back to the birds topic, if our goal is to determine what kind of bird is going to work in different living spaces, then we might use size as our principle of classification because we want to make sure we have enough room for the different kinds of birds. If we're writing a zoology report, though, then it might make sense to use habitat as our principle of classification. With the professor's topic, if we're going to do retirement reports, we would obviously classify professors by age since retirement is linked to age. However, if we're going to do a paper on teaching methods, age wouldn't necessarily make sense. We're going to have some overlap, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So it would probably make sense to classify professors based on teaching style. All right, the next thing that I was going to talk about is we want to make sure that our categories, are exclusive and comprehensive. Exclusive means that we don't have any overlap, that we don't have items that are going to fit into more than one category, because then that makes them a little bit confusing. So if we're going to classify professors based on age, we wouldn't use the categories 25 to 30 and then 30 to 35, because our 30-year-old professors would then fit into more than one category. Instead, we're going to say Here are all the professors 25 to 30, and then the next category is professors who are 31 to 35. That way there's no overlap. By comprehensive categories, I mean that we are not leaving anything out that's important. All major items in a topic are going to fit into a category. So if we're going to classify types of fast food, and I just picked burgers, subs, and pizza, that doesn't include everything. We're leaving something out. And so we want to make sure to include categories that address all major items. So I might be leaving out places like Taco Bell, places that serve Mexican food. I might be leaving out those quick Chinese food places. Those could be considered fast food as well. So you want to make sure you're not leaving anything major out as you're planning your categories. And then you want to fully explain each categories, and those techniques that we've been talking about with descriptive essays and narrative essays, those come back into play. So if you thought you were finished with them, you are wrong. So things like sensory details, specific details, and examples. Some of those examples might be in the form of anecdotes. We might use a little bit of narration, a little bit of storytelling, and we might incorporate some dialogue. Similes, metaphors, comparison, contrast, these are also good things to help develop your categories. You could go back to our definition unit and use some negation. Give us some things that are close but not quite in that category, or give us some background information. So after you have, broken your topic into the categories of the parts, you want to make sure that you're fully explaining them so that we understand what goes into those parts. And then for this paper, you want to develop a thesis. Unlike the descriptive essay or the narrative essay, where you could have had an implied thesis, your classification essay is definitely going to have an explicit thesis in your introduction. It's going to include your topic, what is the subject that you are classifying or dividing, what is the principle that you're using, and then why is this important? We want to understand what we're supposed to get out of it before you start classifying or dividing your topic. So I've given you the sample thesis statement that the book uses for each one, and we'll go through the different parts so that you understand. So here's the classification thesis. Most people consider videos a form of entertainment. However, videos can also serve educational, commercial, and political functions. Our subject, our topic, is videos. Our principle of classification would be the functions that they serve, and then why they're important is because it serves more than just the function of entertainment. There are other functions that we can use videos for. So we're trying to maybe clear up some misconceptions here. The division essay from your book talks about the Grand Canyon. Here's the thesis, and then we're going to talk about the parts. The Grand Canyon is divided into two distinct geographical areas, the North Rim and the South Rim. Each offers different views, facilities, and climatic conditions. So we can see that we're looking at the two geographical locations of the Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon is our subject. Our principle is the geographical areas. And then the reason why we're doing this is because they're very different in these different ways. I think that's kind of not as interesting, but at least it has all the parts. I think you guys are going to come up with way more interesting reasons why these things are important. And as you guys are ready to draft, you might want to visit chapter 10 of your book on page 347. You can see a sample outline here. This might help you as you're trying to organize your paper. You can just kind of see how it's supposed to be laid out. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to visit chapter 10 of your book or stop by your teacher during ACT Lab and ask questions. Hopefully this was helpful for you though.